All right, now. Okay, peoples. Okay, family. We're gonna start this off with a little something, just to see how things is working and see if the people can take to this, because this information is something that is very, 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 very important, and I want to try to outline it the best way I can and see if y'all can, get some information and knowledge over, or it can be the, a foundation of, further research for you. But I think that the information that I'm about to come forth with is very critical and necessary because it's certain things that you didn't know. All right. The first topic that we're going to be talking, let me share my screen here for a second. Okay. Let me share my screen. And I want y'all to try to walk with me on this because I'm going to put it in a certain way that you can digest it. You know what I'm saying? I want you to digest it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over a few slides with you, and on these slides is some information, you know what I mean, uh, that is necessary for you to you know understand. Uh, and just let me get this straight right here first. Let me get out of there. Let me get out of this first. Hold on. The mic volume so you can get me nice and clear on this here. Let me close that up out of there. All right. Now look, what we're gonna do is first is show some information. If I can get it up there. And this information is it's pretty much dealing with the law um, and things like that, and how it affect black folks. Uh, you know what I mean? And I want to start off with a few slide presentations. Right. All right. First of all, we got to understand the Reconstruction um, took place in the mid late 19th century, where the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendment was passed. The 13th Amendment freed slaves. The 14th Amendment gave them uh, rights as citizens, and the 15th Amendment gave them the right to vote. Now, what we're going to be talking about is these Reconstruction Amendment, well, particularly the 13th Amendment. And the reason why we want to particularly deal with the 13th Amendment, because the 13th Amendment was the actual amendment that abolished slavery. And I'm going to show you some things in this amendment that says that slavery is not 100% abolished. So let's go here. I'm going to do a little reading, and I'm going to open up a little bit so you can see it. Okay, now look. The title of this particular, small little write-up that I put together is called Slavery and the Law. And it pretty much deals with the 13th Amendment. It says the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution states that slavery is abolished except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. What this did was left a loophole open, allowing the practice of convict leasing to flourish, particularly in the South or the Southern states. Convict leasing was a practice where prisons or jails provided convicts to private parties like plantations or corporations such as U.S. Steel for lease. In fact, in 1871, the Virginia Supreme Court issued a ruling that declared that a convicted person was a slave to the state. Now, During the whole idea of coming forth with the 13th Amendment, which would ultimately abolish slavery, there was some problems. Some problems back in April of 1864. The problems was with the Democrats, actually. It says in April 1864, the Senate, responding in part to an abolitionist petitions campaign, passed the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery in the United States. Opposition from Democrats in the House of Representatives prevented the amendment from receiving the required two-thirds majority, and the bill failed. A compromise was made to the Democrats, which changed the original proposed amendment to the one we have today with the words, except as a punishment for crime. Now, what I'm getting at with this piece is that what we call freedom, that is, we're up from slavery, and that we are been socialized by the 14th Amendment and became citizens and having the right to vote, the 15th Amendment, so that we can be able to cast the ballot. This particular amendment leaves a hole open for them to do and to bring in basically Jim Crow and allow them to come up with all kinds of black codes and so forth and so on to unjustly incarcerate African American people for stupid little crimes like jaywalking or didn't have a job or things like that, so they can put them in these jails and camps and prisons so they can be leased out to corporations to do and plantations to do free labor. Whereas, these particular jails and prisons get, a kickback from these corporations for this particular leasing, which is no more than legal slavery in and of itself. So, and during this course of time, you understand, from 1864 all the way up to 1868 and the passing of the Reconstruction Amendments, and then you got this whole notion of Jim Crow coming in through the South, which they passed all kinds of bills and put forth certain types of codes in these various southern states to limit the African American population from having access to the ballot, from being considered true citizens of the United States, and so forth and so on. And this is going on even till we get to the point of, Brown versus the Board of Education 1 and 2 would allow black people to be, integrated with, in school systems and stuff like that. And thus the civil rights movement was born. And then we get the, the civil rights bills in 63, 65, 68, and so forth and so on, which have to reassert the same, legislation that was put forth in the 1800s, which is sadly, as I speak, people had to fight and die in order for us to get the legitimate right to vote, and which didn't really come into play until 1970, actually, because they filibustered the 1968 Civil Rights Act until 1970, because they filibustered it, and they really didn't get on the books really until 1970. So technically, we was not really considered, true citizens until 1970, to be exact. All right. So let's move on. Let me reduce this screen right here, and let's go over to another one of my charts here. So as we have been talking about, the issue of mass incarceration, which of course puts forth, the whole idea of, convict leasing, because that's what the prisons is pretty much based on. It's an economic institution that helps corporations, or, be able to do certain things and with free labor and all this other stuff. But we got to have a good understanding of it, how it played a part from the 1800s all the way up, coming up into Jim Crow, all the way up into the civil rights movement, and all the way up until Richard Nixon got into office, where, this is where we get Richard Nixon coming in. Richard Nixon coming in and he became the president in 1969 until 1974. And his pretty much campaign promises was the war on crime, war on drugs, law and order. And then Ronald Reagan coming in In 1981 to 1989, he had this total war on drugs. Of course, you heard what Nancy Reagan was talking about, just say no. Then George W.H. Bush coming in 1998 to 1993 and instituted what is called the mandatory minimum punishment for crimes and mass incarceration really takes off. Then Bill Clinton comes in 1993 to 2001. This is what you get your police state. You get the three strikes, you're out, truth in sentencing, which is the 85%. And then you got the mandatory minimum, abolish parole, building more prisons and so forth and so on. And then the federal crime bill was, proposed by ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council, which came into effect during the Clinton administration, where mass incarceration really flourished at its most. So now let's go back here so we can see it operating. So when Richard Nixon came into office, the prison population was 357,291. By the time he left office, the prison population was 513,900 people. When Ronald Reagan came into office, the prison population was a little over 115,000 people. By that time he left office, it was 759,100 individuals in prison. When George W.H. Bush came into office, the prison population was about 760,000. By the time he left office, the prison population was 1,779,200. Bill Clinton came into office, the prison population was about 1,180,200 people. By the time he left office, it was 2,015,300. By 2001, 878,400 blacks was arrested and placed in prisons all over the states. By 2024, black men made up 40.2% of the prison population, yet only 6.5% of the population at its best. So what we got here, y'all? We got this manifestation of mass incarceration. All of this stuff, if the 13th Amendment was not ratified the way it was, with the exception, you wouldn't have the prison industrial complex. So let me tap back in. Let me stop sharing this. Stop sharing. Okay, so I'm gonna end with that, and I say peace to you. Just record checking to see how this process.